G'day everyone, Lockie Cooke here. It's great. I can't see anyone, but I hope there's thousands of people tuning in live around Australia for the Australia's Innovation Festival. It's great to be here. My opportunity today is to share the iYarn story. I've been loving the opportunity to tune into a lot of different people's presentations. I've been getting a lot of different inspiration. So I was kind of like thinking, rather than the what of the product and all that, I thought I might just pull it back and just kind of talk about the iYarn journey. I'm also saying we haven't absolutely nailed it. We're a humble startup. I've got a team of, there's like 6.5 of us working on this platform around the world. It's been something I've been working on for a number of years, but when I was thinking about it, I think there's a lot of young entrepreneurs coming through the ranks, or young and old people who are having a crack. My journey of iYarn probably goes back to about 15 years. This picture here is of me in a community called Beagle Bay Community, and this is about 3 years after I went up there for the first time in 2005. 2005, I was 15 years old, and I was given an opportunity to go to a remote Indigenous community called Adiulun, Beagle Bay, and Judge and Lombardina on a Indigenous leadership camp. And me as a non-Aboriginal Australian, I hadn't really connected much with Aboriginal people, country, culture over this journey. We weren't taught much about culture in school back then. And, the opportunity to engage wasn't as much. I'm originally from the country, but this was a big opportunity for me to go out country and connect with the longest living culture in the world. And out of this community, I was very lucky to connect with some the amazing Bardi people. They got native title up there, and the Bardi Jawi, the island saltwater people. And over that journey of setting up this ICEA Foundation, which stood for Indigenous Communities Education Awareness Foundation, I was very lucky, along with myself and a bunch of other crew, to learn a lot about the Bardi culture and more about Indigenous culture around the country, because we were enhancing educational facilities in the remote community, but more so what we're doing, we're getting a lot of gadias, or there's a Kimberley word for white fella, learning about Indigenous people, country, culture, and really developing a great relationship. So what we were doing around the country is actually facilitating cultural awareness trainings. And from that moment on, I was very lucky when I was going to the community a lot. An Indigenous elder by the name of Bessie Ejai. She's the matriarch of the Ejai family from the Sunday Islands. And they thought it was appropriate for me to go into the community to actually give me a name and adopt me into the Ejai family, cultural adoption, and be passed on a name that was relevant for me. And this name is Binjali, and he was a past lawman, and he was a very respected man in the community, good bloke. And Bessie thought it would be appropriate to pass that name down to me. But having that name, I needed to respect that name and respect the cultural norms of the Bardi people whenever I went into the community, but also, as me as a person, as Binjali. One of the core, there's so much to Bardi culture, but one of the real foundations to Bardi culture is this word called iYarn. So iYarn is a word for, I'm simplifying it massively, but, the most lamest way, they say it's your body, your emotion, your mind, your spirit, your everything. So that's your iYarn. And one of the big fundamentals of your iYarn is if anyone was to ever ask you, how's your iYarn, it's crucial for you to be honest with them in that moment and share, how is your iYarn? Do you have a heavy iYarn or light iYarn? And you're feeling good. And because if you don't, it's kind of like disrespectful to your mob, the person who asked you that question, the community, the Bardi culture. And for me as a Gadia coming in, and all of a sudden my mum, in my community would create this one word would create with so much context behind it and so much meaning, it instantly created that safe space to me to truly share, how I was going in that moment. And then kind of what happened in my life, I set up this organization when I was 17 and ran it for about 8 years. And it was a great experience. Did it when I was doing my university degree, and I was also a kayaker. And but then I went full-time into it for a number of years. And then around, that 23, 24, 25 mark, all of a sudden I was very privileged growing up, but all of a sudden I had experiences of mental health, both in my peer group, in my family, and also personally. And, some of these stats kind of, really paint a bit of a picture. around, 45% of Australians who experience a mental health condition in their lifetimes. 20% of Australians who face mental health issues this year. And, 25% visit the GP are related to mental health issues. You can kind of see, and, me and my family, and a big thing all of a sudden, we did have a passing in the family to suicide, and we had a few mates who lost their lives, and we're like, we've got this one memory. We're leaving the funeral, and we're just sitting around with a couple of lads, and we're like, we just got to check in on each other more. The challenge was, we've lived our whole life, and we didn't really know how to truly check in. It's like when you go to the gym. If you don't, work out, you can't bench press 100 kilos if you haven't trained for that. But if you train for that, you can do it easy. So the idea is, we need to strengthen these muscles. But then, what is the first steps we can do to, be able to facilitate a bit of a check-in? And one of the foundations for checking in is creating a safe space. And people who are new on this journey, sometimes it's really useful to assist them with facilitating that safe space. So what I used to do with a couple of my mates, we used to actually do this thing called the life wheel. A mentor used to do this with me. We used to catch up every 4 to 6 weeks. He used to draw on a piece of paper, Lockie, what are the areas of life that really matter to you? And he'd help me workshop the thing. In that point in time, when I was like 17, 18, 19, 20, they did shift a bit over time. But every time we caught up, essentially what you do, you choose a spokes: family, friends, relationships, career, whatever it is, sport, training, love, romance, sex, whatever it is. And then in the middle is like a 0 or 1. And then on the outside is a 10. And then you plot where you're at, 0 in the middle or 10 on the outside, where you're at in that moment in time. And if you do that yourself, when you have a catch up, a yarn with a mate, all of a sudden you are, one, more self-aware where you're at right now, because it's used as a reflection tool. But then also, if you're willing to create a safe environment for your buddy, your lover, your peer, your colleague to check in on these areas of life or work. So these areas could be, personal or professional or a hybrid of the two. All of a sudden you can actually have a really meaningful conversation. And there's a lot of, content around there around vulnerability builds connection. So this was really powerful for me initially, personally. And then in some of the businesses I've done, other startups I've done over the journey, I've actually used this as a tool to check in with my employees and my management team to just see how they're going. Like, sometimes, particularly in the startup journey, you get so caught up in, performance reports, getting the data, getting the sales in the door. And it's really exciting early on because you may have you may have got some funds, and all of a sudden you're going down this target. But then, that's the goal, that's where we've got to go. But actually you're not bringing, maybe everyone is not as motivated as maybe the owners or the leadership group, the early employees, because they've got to share investment plan or something like that. You've got other people who are coming into the organisation and they have been brought on because of the vision and the purpose, but they may actually not be incentivised through shares. So a big thing with that is how do you truly stay connected and making sure that the direction of the organisation that it's taking is aligned to the reason why these employees joined it. Because in the early stage of a startup, you tend to pivot, jump, shift, to kind of identify what the product is to meet your purpose. So this is really effective for me in startups that I've done over the years. And I used to do this on Excel. But then a time kind of came when I was like, I'm a bit disorganized sometimes. I do it down on a piece of paper and I lose that piece of paper. Or I do it in Excel form and I forget to do it one time, and then all of a sudden there's a big bit of data that's missing. So I was like, let's try to make this super simple for us to do a quick and easy check-in. So that's essentially where iYarn has come up. So if you're listening here and you're tuning in, maybe driving a car, it's probably a bit dangerous, but on this QR code here, we've got a public QR code. And what you can do here is actually scan this and then you can have a bit of an experience of iYarn. So it's the life wheel. But this is a public check-in, so it's completely anonymous, this type of check-in. But if you had the ability, you're more than welcome to create an account and then customize the segments that you want to do. Because it is Mental Health Month this month, and this is a public check-in that we're doing. We've got over a few hundred people who have completed this. And what this allows us to do is actually give us a bit of a sentiment of my community or people using iYarn of where the room's at right now in the areas of life that matter most. usually what I do now is kind of give you a bit of a live demo, but with this presentation, we're not actually able to do this live demo with the live URL. So I'll share this with you. The Spark Festival is actually using iYarn tool as a data collection tool to kind of show the deliverables. You know, are you feeling inspired? Are you motivated? Are you learning new skills? Are you connecting with a community? You know, these are key outcomes or objectives of the Spark Festival. And our iYarn platform makes it really easy for organisers, presenters, facilitators to be able to communicate the sentiment of the room, so I can speak to the room and do that. So it can be really useful for reporting, for presentations, to connecting with your workforce. So that's a big thing that we've kind of done. With the remaining time I've kind of got, we've been really lucky, the platform, that we've got a few, you know, the journey that we've kind of taken. We started off with the MVP, where, you know, I think this will be connect for a lot of startups who are in a similar phase where we're very early stage. You know, we've been family, friends, got a little bit of investment from my meditation coach. He's like, yeah, this makes complete sense. His whole philosophy, he's a pranic healer, and all the basics of our meditation goes around body, emotion, mind, spirit. And it's really funny how it's very aligned with iYarn. And, you know, what we want to do is, like, how do we get more people checking in on the areas of life that matter most? So that's the social aspect around how do we get family, friends, peers to check in. So this is free for consumers. You know, punters who just, you know, punters yourself, if you just logged into this, you want to have a play around with it and check in with your kid. Check in with your peers, your romantic partner, your husband, wife, whatever it is. Because you go through these journeys and all of a sudden a year goes by, COVID goes by. But how are you checking in on the areas of life that matter to you? And that's what iYarn allows you to do. But then what we've actually found, that B2C model it's not really a tool that we want to commercialize. We want this as a tool that people can use as a bit of a freemium product. They get the experience. And then what they have the ability to do, that we can, that, wow, this is awesome. It's so simple. It's easy to use. It's interactive. I can fully customize my segments. And then all of a sudden what's happened, we've actually pivoted to, you know, the B2C is churning. We've got a high volume of people engaging with that way. But now what we're doing, we've got the B2B, where we've got, you know, we've got a bit of a, when people could argue it's a bit of a shotgun approach, but we've focusing on, you know, the larger end of town who have the resources, HR people and cultural leads who can take on iYarn and implement it. We're working with schools, people in the NDIS sector, but then also, you know, in banks as well. We've been very, very encouraging recently. We've rolled out iYarn across Uber, across APAC. They're using it. It's actually a performance management tool. So checking in on the areas of the workplace that matter most. And this has been a huge feather in our cap. You know, we've gone through the DD throughout the organisation, and now we're rolling it off internationally with a few different brands that are using it. Just the way how, you know, you can go off and have a coffee catch up and coffee yarn and then check in on the areas of the work or life that matter most. So what we've kind of got here, I'm just going into the Q&A, checking if there's any questions. Now my internet's frozen. I hope it's still working. Geez. I hope you can hear me. I'm just going to continue talking, assuming that it's still streaming. I think the slide that's up there in front of me now is a bit of the PR exposure we've had recently. I've been lucky to connect with a few mentors over the last year or so. Who've kind of said, you know, when you're in this early stage startup phase, it's really crucial that you do a bit of PR. It's a really good way you can get some great exposure. Oh, here we go. I'm back now. It's a great way you can get a bit of exposure. So what we've been doing is getting on a lot of webinars, a few discussions. We've been very lucky to get a bunch of PR in mainstream newspapers to get it out there. I think as a startup, you know, pumping a lot of money that you don't really have into advertising, unless you've got a real dedicated budget to that marketing advertising, it doesn't, you know, because you want to be investing to these things for, like, you know, 4 or 5 months to really identify and really nailing those customers. We've done it at a small scale, but parallel to that, we've really gone on the PR, and that's how we've actually attracted a lot of bigger B2B clients, because you kind of do a bit of a call, have a bit of a, you know, if it's on LinkedIn or email, and say, hey, have you read the article in the paper over the weekend and stuff like that. So that's been really effective. So yeah, I think just towards the end there, I might throw it out to any questions we may have. If anyone's got any questions, here we go. Hope you hear your story. We can hear you. Thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it. Oh, Dasha, very nice. Groovy. Yeah, so that's kind of the iYarn story. Feel free to have a bit of a play around with the platform. If you've got any questions around, specific startup questions, we've got another 4 minutes. If you've got any questions, I just wanted to smash out that presentation, give you a bit of a taste of the iYarn story. We're not a huge organization. We've managed to do things pretty lean. We've got I ended up doing our MVP domestically in Australia with an outsourced team as a non-technical founder. I've gone through the journey of hiring a co-CTO, but it was interesting because I didn't really have the resources and engagement. This story is quite a personal story to me. And, now I have found a co-founder who has these technical competencies, but it was a bit, I was a bit daunted at first to kind of go down this path. And I did seek 2 different CTOs initially. But it's a real hard balance because you're putting maybe a big chunk of equity potentially in this person you don't necessarily know super well, and bring him through that journey. And I think a bit of advice would be on that CTO journey, if that's a question. I'm just dribbling here because I see Natasha put a question there, and this was a question that we had when we spoke. It's important to try to find a CTO, but don't jump the gun too early because it can create a lot more work than necessary. Thanks, Olga. How did you go about approaching the large companies like Uber? Groovy. With Uber, it's kind of like it was this offering a solution at the right time. What we're finding right now, a lot of companies around the world are in this is huge shift. So obviously, I don't need to tell you COVID's happening. Uber, for example, they've just made a commitment that but no one's expected to work from home. It's going to be forced to work from home until June 2021. So all of a sudden, it's like they're really desperate. Like Uber's a very advanced organization. They're very sophisticated at how they support their employees. And the way is like they're looking. This is a time where they're looking for a product like us to in an innovative solution that's helping fundamentally connect their peers in the workplace. I think we're really lucky, right time, right place. I personally have a very strong relationship with Uber because of the previous startup. We were the large solution provider for Uber, my previous startup that I was involved with and I'm still involved with. But even with all the networks, all the relationships and all the contacts I had at Uber, it didn't really mean much up until I met with the person that I needed to meet with. So this has been a real interesting thing for me. Like you can have yarns to the marketing team, the person in finance who's a mate of a mate who's going to hook you up. But unless you go to this is a great learning lesson for me, exact person who could champion and lead this product in the organization, and then they get on board, they understand the value of it, then they champion it through the organization. That was a big learner for me, is that I've probably been, without using vulgar language, I've been running around the bush a bit, probably pitching to the wrong people. And now it's kind of through this journey, I probably identify the right people I want to check in on, which is really good. Are you open to people connecting with you if something emerges after we've had time to filter what we shared during? Yep, 100%. My contact details, more than happy to send my email. It's just Lockie, LOCKIE, at iYarn, IYARN.com.au. That's my direct email. I assume if you've listened through this, you've kind of aligned and you appreciate what iYarn is. So yeah, feel free to drop me an email. I'd love to connect. I think a big thing that is totally underappreciated in the value of this spark is doing exactly what has said. You've got to actually reach out and have a yarn. I listened to another one of these Spark presenters and I was so inspired. I connected on LinkedIn and we're meeting up for coffee, and I wouldn't have met with that person unless the Spark Festival facilitated that. So it was great. You have hit some great milestones. What are the next steps for iYarn, and what has been your biggest obstacle to date? The last 20 seconds. The biggest milestone I've had is actually hiring an internal dev team. That was huge, just to create consistency and have sprint plans, which has been amazing. Get funds. So then the resources, pitch the idea, get the funds to back the dev team. There be two big ones, and then landing a big B2B client. So that's it. Love you all.